Can nonprofits transition from public charity to private foundation? Have you ever wondered if a nonprofit can switch its status from a public charity to a private foundation? This is a question many organizations face as they evolve. The answer is yes, nonprofits can make this transition, but there are important details to consider. When a nonprofit moves from being a public charity to a private foundation, it is often seen as a downgrade in terms of regulatory oversight. Private foundations have stricter rules and face more scrutiny than public charities. The process for this change is relatively straightforward. The nonprofit simply needs to file the right forms, like Form 990-PF, to notify the Internal Revenue Service of the change. However, it is important to note that private foundations have different tax treatments. Donors may receive fewer tax benefits when contributing to a private foundation compared to a public charity. Additionally, private foundations must follow stricter rules regarding self-dealing and distributions. On the other hand, if a nonprofit wants to transition from a private foundation to a public charity, the process is more complicated and can take up to 5 years. The organization must file IRS Form 8940 to inform the Internal Revenue Service of its intent to change status. During this 5-year period, the nonprofit must operate as a public charity. It must meet public support tests, showing that a significant portion of its funding comes from the general public or government sources. The Internal Revenue Service requires proof that the organization is genuinely functioning as a public charity, not just in name. This includes demonstrating a change in funding and governance structure. While the nonprofit is in this transition, it may still be liable for certain excise taxes that apply to private foundations until the change is officially confirmed by the Internal Revenue Service. To qualify as a public charity, the nonprofit must meet one of the public support tests set by the Internal Revenue Service. Generally, this means that at least 1/3 of its revenue must come from public donations or government grants. This requirement ensures that the organization is broadly supported by the public rather than being controlled by a small group of donors or insiders. Changing from a public charity to a private foundation or vice versa has various legal and governance implications. Tax filings, donor deductibility, and compliance obligations will all be affected. Private foundations have stricter rules on self-dealing, minimum distribution requirements, and excise taxes on investment income. Public charities, in contrast, enjoy fewer restrictions and greater flexibility in their fundraising efforts. For nonprofits considering this transition, it is essential to evaluate whether the change aligns with their mission and funding model. Consulting with legal and tax professionals who understand nonprofit law is highly recommended. This will help ensure compliance with all Internal Revenue Service requirements during the transition. Transparency with donors about the change and its effects on contributions is also vital. While transitioning from a public charity to a private foundation is a relatively straightforward process, it does come with more regulatory constraints. Conversely, moving from a private foundation to a public charity is possible but requires a long-term commitment to meet the necessary standards and demonstrate public support. Each path presents distinct legal, tax, and operational consequences that nonprofits should carefully consider.